government, private sector, civil society, media alliance. This thing was completely orchestrated top down to avoid the appearance of top down in 2017. They borrowed this concept from their military counterinsurgency work and they simply grafted it onto censorship. But I don't know, do you want to just watch this? Sorry. If you just look for the phrase whole of society at Mike Ben Cyber, you could also,
talking about.
Well, if you go to in my highlights tab and scroll down, I think you'll see it there. It's a supercut. I use the phrase supercut if that's helpful to highlight it. But whole society is this concept that the government will fund allies to astroturf the appearance of a spontaneous, democratic surround sound around the need to do the censorship work. So there are 4 quadrants in their whole society framework. Government meaning all the different government, they have a whole of government side of that, which is everything from the State Department, the DHS, HHS for COVID censorship work, FBI, DOJ, National Science Foundation, all that. The private sector are the private sector companies, the social media tech platforms where the censorship actually takes place. The civil society quadrant means university censorship centers, disinformation studies is what they call it, misnomer of the century. But so there's now about 100 U.S. universities. Every major U.S. university has a censorship center. Whether it'll be called disinformation studies. Sometimes it'll be tucked under their sociology department or their communications, even their applied physics when they do AI censorship. So you have in the civil society layer, you have the universities, the NGOs, the activist groups, the independent nonprofit foundations. And then the 4th quadrant is media, which is the government working with media to promote censorship of U.S. citizens. And so by effectively wielding all these assets so that there's government funding and government coordination, but technically most of the pressure being put on the tech companies is coming from, here you go, you can just watch, just it's like a funny supercut. We don't need to watch the whole thing, but you'll get the picture very quickly.
And we hear the term all the time, a problem like disinformation, fighting disinformation, really requires a whole society response. And I know whole society is a little bit cliche and a term that gets thrown around a lot.
Addressing disinformation requires a whole of society approach.
Disinformation is not going to be fixed by governments acting alone. I think we see that a whole of society effort is really key to the solution.
There are some countries, more so in Europe or up in other parts of North America, that are more progressive in recognizing that this is a whole of society challenge.
Whole of society approach, and what would be your wish list if you could implement anything, or to be able to trust when somebody tells them it's fake? Is there anything that governments can do on that front? Absolutely. This is a whole of society problem. So there's things that governments can do, individual national governments and multilateral institutions.
Disinformation challenges democracy require that we work together as a community to share our experiences and to hold governments, social media platforms, and political leaders accountable for making sure that people are empowered with information that is real and accurate. Democracy depends on a healthy information space that can only be achieved through a whole of society effort.
Countering disinformation. We often talk about a whole of society response. Of course, we need that.
Disinformation, a whole of society approach. I want to get into the, quote, whole of society response, that whole of society network response, private sector, public sector, civil society.
Memes that we're circulating, and that to me is the whole of society approach.
I think the solution has to be whole of society, which is the word that we throw around a lot, especially in venues like these, right? We need cooperation from the tech platforms, good faith cooperation and enforcement of terms of service. But we also need people in the government who are willing to say, yes, this is a problem, and it's not just about foreign actors.
Okay, so a few things on that. If you remember the SEPS video, the CIA front NED program to get censorship laws in 140 countries, if you remember, there was one of those 9 things they read off is that the U.S. government needs to capacity build these counter misinformation institutions in civil society because the government has the money and the resources, but not the credibility. Civil society organizations, the universities, the NGOs, they've got the credibility, but not the money. So that's part of what they're saying here with the role of this civil society is the government can't be seen as telling everyone to do all of this censorship because that's authoritarian. That would look not credible. That would look authoritarian for the government to do. So we've got the muscle and the money, but not the credibility. Our cutout organizations have the credibility, but not the money and the muscle. So we're going to give them the money and the muscle. And so I can show you, if you want to see what this looks like in action, I can show you some great videos that sort of show this. If you just look up WiseDex, it's in my highlights. It's also, if you just do @MikeBenCyber WiseDex, I'll show you a couple of things of how this works. So when Jamie's able to pull that up, WiseDex, WISEDEX. Mm-hmm. And so Trump did something really ambitious when he was president at the National Science Foundation. The National Science Foundation is the main funder of higher education in the United States. It's a $10 billion pool of money that goes to fund university centers. And it is sort of the civilian arm of DARPA. It's technically, a sort of civilian, foundation for science. But if you look at its history, it basically has it's when military technology becomes dual use for commercial and civilian purposes. So, for example, the internet itself started off as DARPA in the 60s. Then it was transferred to the National Science Foundation for civilian, effectively management. And then it made its way to the World Wide Web. That's why the National Science Foundation has a 15% quota on national security related projects. And all the technical implementers of the censorship programs at the National Science Foundation come from DARPA, including this that I'm going to show here. But so Trump created this thing in his first term at the National Science Foundation called the Convergence Accelerator Program. And the idea is that we were going to converge scientists from different fields to solve these home run swing challenges like, cold fusion and all the quantum mechanics challenges that required physicists to talk to data scientists and network modelers and bringing them all together so that they could all converge on a common problem. So we set up about 5 of these tracks in 2019. Biden gets into office. His first year in office, his National Science Foundation creates a new track. It's called Track F. And the whole thing is for countering misinformation, to converge scientists on developing censorship technology to censor the internet at scale. So they have spent tens of millions of dollars. This one that we're about to watch was eligible for $5.7 million from the National Science Foundation. It received $750,000 from the National Science Foundation to create this. This is the promo video that they put up on YouTube in connection with their grant. So I'll just let it play and then I'll.
Posts that go viral on social media can reach millions of people. Unfortunately, some posts are misleading. Social media platforms have policies about harmful misinformation. For example, Twitter has a policy against posts that say authorized COVID vaccines will make you sick. When something is mildly harmful, platforms attach warnings, like this one that points readers to better information. Really bad things they remove. But before they can enforce, platforms have to identify the bad stuff, and they miss some of it. Actually, they miss a lot, especially when the posts aren't in English. To understand why, let's consider how platforms usually identify bad posts. There are too many posts for a platform to review everything. So first, a platform flags a small fraction for review. Next, human reviewers act as judges, determining which flag posts violate policy guidelines. If the policies are too abstract, both steps, flagging and judging, can be difficult. WiseText helps by translating abstract policy guidelines into specific claims that are more actionable. For example, the misleading claim that the COVID-19 vaccine suppresses a person's immune response. Each claim includes keywords associated with the claim in multiple languages. For example, a Twitter search for negative efficacy yields tweets that promote the misleading claim. A search on eficacia negativa yields Spanish tweets promoting that same claim. The trust and safety team at a platform can use those keywords to automatically flag matching posts for human review. WiseText harnesses the wisdom of crowds as well as AI techniques to select keywords for each claim and provide other information in the claim profile. For human reviewers, a WiseText browser plugin identifies misinformation claims that might match the post. The reviewer then decides which matches are correct, a much easier task than deciding if posts violate abstract policies. Reviewer efficiency.
So COVID-19 was essentially like a proof of concept of all this, right? Like this is something they could utilize and see how everything works, because you have this some consensus among most people because of the media narrative that this is dangerous, we're all going to die. The thing that's fucking us up is these people are vaccine deniers and these people who are believing things that are ridiculous, like natural immunity. And so you have like a public support of this thing to go full scale, where they can try it out with COVID-19, where there was no real specific narratives that we thought of wholly as problematic as a society before COVID-19. COVID-19 became one that at least a large swath of society believed the narrative that's being given to you by corporate news, and this was a thing that they could combat on social media and have support for this type of censorship.
They had already begun doing it for hate speech before COVID-19. It didn't hit the scale, though, but they were already using hate speech as a proxy for populism, both in the U.S. and across NATO. And they were conflating everything with hate speech. Basically,
right.
If you opposed open borders in the U.S. or in Italy or in Germany or in the U.K. In fact, that's why the U.S. Justice Department funded Hate Lab. You want to see another crazy video from all this? I'm not saying we have to pull it up. This one up.
Pull it up.
Yeah. Look up the Hate Lab. Their video on their AI scan and ban dashboard.
And all of this is just a large scale implementation of censorship.
Yes.
They're just using all these different things to get people accustomed to it and to try to start using this full scale.
Yes, actually, before we go to the Hate Lab, I do want to dwell on this COVID thing for a second, because that's exactly right. On what we just watched with WiseText, just coming back to this whole society concept. So this is the National Science Foundation. The administrators for this are both DARPA guys. It is funding the University of Michigan to create an AI censorship claims database so that the censorship policies that the Biden administration strong-armed onto these social media companies, as we know from Mark Zuckerberg and others, to adopt in the first place, so that there's no escape. There's every claim that a COVID vaccine skeptic says will be mapped out in a sort of, lexicon code book of terms and claims that will then be automatically flagged. And the National Science Foundation does not want to be seen as having the government tell the private sector companies to do it. So it is capacity building a civil society nonprofit, the University of Michigan Disinformation Lab, to create this AI censorship technology to then sell to the social media platforms to make sure there's no escape in terms of the ability to criticize government policy on COVID without getting censored. But just to drive home that point on COVID censorship, this is something that I think is really terrifying that the people should be aware of. There's a company called Graphica, which figures very heavily in all of the censorship industry. If you pull up Graphica's April 2020 report on COVID and COVID conspiracy theories, It's also on my timeline. If you look up the word Graphica, it's Graphika. Graphica is a longtime military contractor that did social media monitoring, surveillance, and analytics work for the U.S. military and intelligence in order to see what narratives opposition, various political movements or insurgent groups are saying on social media. They were formerly a part of the Pentagon's Minerva Initiative. The Minerva Initiative is the Psychological Operations Research Center at the Pentagon. When the Pentagon is trying to do information shaping operations, and they solicit propositions and ideas and thought leadership from outside organizations to help the military achieve psychological operations outcomes that are favorable to the intended military policy. So Graphica has gotten over $7 million in Pentagon grants. It was formerly a part of the Pentagon's psychological operations